If it weren't for Elise being soft-hearted, no one here would have wanted you to show up. Harold Vance raised his champagne glass and said it loudly enough for the nearest tables to hear, while I stood there in the middle of my sister's wedding, like a name that had somehow slipped onto the guest list by mistake. I hadn't spoken to my family in 17 years, and when Elise's invitation arrived in my mailbox, handwritten in blue ink on a plain envelope with no return address, I knew immediately. This wasn't just a wedding invitation. It was a return to a place that could either bring a part of me back to life or bury it a little deeper. What my father didn't know, what my stepmother didn't know, what the 320 guests sipping champagne inside Magnolia Harbor House that night didn't know, was that the bride was only alive to wear white because of me. And before the night was over, I would end up on the marble floor of that same reception, saving one more life. Before I go on, if you like stories like this, stories about family, buried truth, dignity, betrayal, and the kind of reversal that leaves an entire room speechless, go ahead and like, subscribe, and let me know where you're listening from. And now, let me take you back to the first Sunday in May, the day I drove more than 4 hours from Savannah to Charleston to attend a wedding I once believed I would never have the strength to walk into. My 9-year-old SUV rolled along the coastal road through that honey-colored southern light that only shows up in early May. Elise's invitation sat on the passenger seat beside a cup of cold coffee and the sunglasses I hadn't bothered to wear. I drove slower than usual, not because of traffic, because every mile brought me closer to a place where, 17 years earlier, I had been pushed out like an object that no longer belonged in the house. The wind came in through the cracked window carrying salt, marsh grass, warm wood, and the faint heat rising off the pavement. Charleston in early May is beautiful in a way that almost feels cruel. Some cities are like that. So beautiful they make you forget they can hide the sharpest memories in the prettiest streets. Well, I pulled over near a small gas station about 15 minutes outside downtown and sat there with both hands on the wheel, looking at myself in the rearview mirror. I had commanded sea rescue operations. I had flown through storm fronts. I had listened to broken distress calls through a headset and made decisions in 10 seconds, knowing those decisions could mean the difference between somebody going home or not. But walking into a wedding where my own father was waiting to look down on me, somehow that still felt harder. I inhaled for 4 counts, hold, exhale for 4, the same breathing pattern I had used in rough weather when the ocean below me disappeared into black. Now I needed it just to walk into a reception hall. Magnolia Harbor House came into view at the end of the road like a postcard designed for Charleston's upper crust. A historic white estate overlooking the harbor. Tall columns, warm string lights hanging from the porch, white flowers lining the walkway, a low fountain glimmering in the courtyard. The valet lane was crowded with Bentleys, Range Rovers, and black sedans polished to a mirror shine. I shook my head when the valet approached and kept driving to the overflow lot near the service entrance, about 450 feet from the main doors. I've always preferred to keep my own keys in my own hand. It helps me breathe. By the time I crossed the courtyard, I could already hear jazz drifting through the open doors, mixed with laughter, glasses touching, and the clipped rhythm of expensive heels on stone. I stepped into the foyer and stopped in front of the family display mounted on a painted easel near the welcome table. When there were photographs of Harold Vance, Vivian Hale Vance, Elise Vance, cousins, business partners, family friends, all arranged with the kind of precision that looked more like brand management than memory. There was Elise at graduation, Elise in Nantucket, Harold on a yacht, Harold at a fundraiser, Harold smiling beside Vivian in tuxedos and gowns. But there was no sign of me, not one. Again, quietly, neatly, deliberately, and that's the cruelest kind of rejection, isn't it? Not being hated out loud, being erased so carefully that anyone looking in from the outside would assume you had never existed at all. If you want to understand why that display hit me so hard, You have to go back 17 years to the house on Isle of Palms where Harold Vance had built his life with concrete, debt, real estate. And the kind of ambition this city mistakes for virtue. My father was the kind of man Charleston respected. He built Vance Coastal Holdings from 2 marshland parcels into a portfolio of luxury developments, private marinas, vacation properties, and waterfront money. He believed in wealth, in image, in legacy, in children continuing whatever path he had laid out for them. When I was 24, fresh out of marine engineering school with an acceptance letter from the Navy in my hand, I thought if I told him honestly what I wanted, he'd be angry, but eventually understand. I was wrong. I built all of this so you would never have to throw your life into danger, he said that day, standing in front of the glass wall facing the ocean. And now you want to wear a uniform and go out there rescuing strangers? I told him I didn't want my life spent in conference rooms, reviewing contracts and pretending money gave meaning to everything. I wanted to do work that mattered. I wanted to be where the distress calls went. I wanted to answer when somebody was in trouble. I still remember the look in his eyes, not concern, not fear, not disappointment. It was the look of a man who believed he had just been personally defied. Vivian had only been married to him for 2 years at that point. She stood in the living room doorway holding a glass of iced tea, saying almost nothing, but somehow making the room colder. "She'll learn soon enough," she said softly. "Out there, nobody rolls out a red carpet for girls who think they're special." At the time, I thought it was just another elegant insult. Later, I understood it was also a promise. Vivian liked to predict failures she intended to help create. The argument lasted less than 40 minutes, but it was enough to divide my life into a before and an after. Harold didn't shout. He was most frightening when he was calm. He walked upstairs, came back down with my suitcase, and placed it by the front door as neatly as if he were setting down a piece of decor. "If you walk out of this house for that life," he said, "don't come back expecting to be my daughter." I thought Elise hadn't heard any of it. Then I looked up and saw her halfway down the staircase, 16 years old, hair loose over her shoulders, face red from crying. She didn't speak, neither did I, and some moments are too large for words. I picked up my suitcase and walked out. The door shut behind me. That was the sound 17 years began with. I came back to the present when a young woman at the seating station handed me my place card. I turned it over. Not Naomi Vance, not sister of the bride, not daughter of the Vance family, just guest of the bride. Table 28, at the back, near the service corridor. I laughed under my breath. It was clever, I'll give them that. Polite enough to be defensible. Humiliating enough to make sure I understood exactly where I stood. The ballroom was all white linen, crystal stemware, tall candles, and carefully staged elegance. Every table looked like a magazine spread. Cream roses, gold-rimmed place settings, live music low enough to sound expensive. Where the head table was positioned beneath hanging lights and a floral arch, naturally centered around Harold, like the room had been arranged by gravity itself. Everything in that room said the same thing. Power has its own interior design. I had barely sat down at table 28 when I heard the quick rustle of wedding satin and a breathless voice say my name. Naomi. Only one word, but I knew that voice instantly. Elise wrapped her arms around me before I was fully on my feet. She still smelled like jasmine, the same perfume she used to wear when she was too young for perfume, only now mixed with hairspray, powder, and a tremor she was trying hard to control. She leaned back, both hands gripping my arms, eyes bright and already wet. "You came." I looked at her. Of course I did. She smiled like she might cry, her dress elegant, clean, understated in the way only something very expensive can be. She looked beautiful. But the thing I noticed most was the panic underneath it all. The way she held on to me like she was afraid I could still disappear. "Listen to me," she said quickly, glancing behind her shoulder. "I sent the invitation myself. Adrian knows everything. No matter what happens tonight, please don't leave." I frowned. "Elise, you're making me nervous." She shook her head. "I'm not letting them tell your story for you anymore." Then someone pulled her away for more photos, and she was gone again, leaving behind Jasmine and the pressure of her hands still lingering on my skin. Harold found me less than 20 minutes later. Same posture, same measured stride, every step saying he believed the room belonged to him. He stopped beside my chair, champagne in hand, looking me over the way men like him inspect unwanted variables. "I didn't think you'd actually dare show up," he said. I looked up. "Elise invited me." He gave a slight smile. "Elise has always been too soft-hearted." That was Harold. He could turn kindness into weakness with one sentence. Vivian appeared almost immediately after, as if she had a gift for sensing where Harold might need reinforcement wrapped in silk. Pearl-colored gown, thin diamond chain, that carefully rehearsed smile. "Naomi," she said, "what a surprise. I assumed you were still drifting from one mission to the next." I smiled politely. "My work is going well." She nodded in that way people do when they aren't really listening but are waiting for their turn to stab again. "Well is such a flexible word. I just mean, have you ever found anything stable? A home? In a family? Or is it still all uniforms and emergencies?" She kept her voice low enough to sound civilized, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. Then a male voice cut in. "So this is our famous Navy woman." Preston Hale, Vivian's older brother, owner of several luxury marina properties on the East Coast, stepped up with a whiskey glass in hand and a grin that already annoyed me. He shook my hand for half a second and looked down at me like I was a curiosity. "I hear you work rescue operations." "I command them." Preston chuckled. "Meaning you clean up after other people's bad decisions." Vivian laughed softly. Harold didn't, but he didn't stop him either. With Harold, silence was always a form of approval. There are parties where you realize very early you weren't invited to be welcomed. You were invited to play a role, the failure, and the runaway daughter, the cautionary example, the living proof of what happens when someone chooses a life Harold Vance didn't authorize. So I sat there and let them talk, partly because I was used to it, partly because I refused to give them what they wanted most, my reaction. Harold hated composure, because when I didn't crumble, the version of me he had sold to people began to crack. Dinner was served. Candlelight shifted across crystal. Conversations rose and fell. Then Harold stood to give his speech. The room quieted instantly. He raised his glass with the ease of a man who had spent his whole life making every room turn toward him. "Tonight," he began, "we celebrate Elise, my daughter, who has always understood the value of family." There were polite smiles, a few nods. "She has always known what matters. Well, she has always known when to stay. She has always known what should never be traded away." He paused just long enough for anyone paying attention to understand who he was really talking about. Some people spend their lives chasing what they call purpose, only to forget that the first duty of any human being is to know where they belong. Several heads turned subtly in my direction. I lifted my water glass and said nothing. He finished to applause and stepped down from the head table. Then, as he passed my table, he stopped just far enough into the open that at least 3 or 4 nearby tables could hear him clearly. "If it weren't for Elise being soft-hearted," he said, "no one here would have wanted you to show up." The air around me changed. A server froze with a bread basket in hand. A woman at the next table set down her fork. Vivian stood just behind Harold with her fingertips resting gently on his arm in a gesture that pretended to soften him while making sure the performance continued. Preston watched with that same entertained half smile. 17 years ago, that sentence might have split me in half. 17 years ago, I might have run. I might have cried in my car, then spent another decade telling myself it didn't matter. But 17 years had taught me something. People who use contempt to make you smaller are always most unsettled when you stay perfectly still. I looked straight at Harold. Funny thing about pity, I said, quietly, clearly. The people who talk about it most are usually the ones who need it. He blinked. That wasn't the dramatic response he wanted. My calm robbed him of the scene. He walked away with no comeback. I stayed seated for another few seconds, then stood and slipped out through the side corridor. At the end of the hall, there was a mirror facing the harbor. I stood there with both hands on the cool stone counter, breathing slowly. I wasn't crying, but my eyes were hot. Some wounds don't come out through tears. They lodge somewhere deeper, where part of you still exists at 24, standing by a front door with a suitcase in your hand. I remembered the academy graduation without my father in the crowd, my promotion ceremony without family, the medals I received with fellow officers beside me instead of anyone who shared my last name. I remembered the night I almost got thrown against the side rail in rough water, and the first thought that flashed through me wasn't about dying, and it was wondering whether anyone in that family would even say my name out loud if I did. My phone buzzed in my clutch. It was a message from Rachel Sloan, an officer who had helped shape the hardest years of my career. Heard you're in Charleston. Whatever happens tonight, remember who you are. I stared at it for a long second. Then I put the phone away, breathed in, held, breathed out. I was not 24 anymore. I was Naomi Vance, Rear Admiral, United States Navy, a woman who had pulled people out of black water and brought them home alive. I straightened my shoulders, adjusted my dress, and walked back in. That was when Adrian found me near the bar. He didn't resemble Harold or Preston or any of the men who orbited money for a living. He didn't need to dominate space to feel important. He handed me a glass of water. "And I only have a minute," he said quietly. "Elise has been planning this for a long time." I looked at him. "Planning what?" He swallowed once. "Elise knows you were the one who saved her 9 years ago." I went still. "What?" Adrian nodded. "It took her years to find the records. Archived local coverage, public rescue reports, a partially released operations file. When your name finally came up," he shook his head, "she cried for hours." There are strange kinds of secrets in this world. Some are hidden because people are ashamed. Some are hidden because people are afraid. And some are kept quiet because love is too clean to turn a rescue into leverage. 9 years earlier, the distress call came in while I was on night response rotation off Charleston Harbor. A small speedboat had struck a channel marker in deteriorating weather. When 2 passengers were thrown into the water, one was pulled out by a nearby vessel. The other was trapped under the overturned hull and tangled in mooring line. Wind was high, visibility low, water black under floodlights. I still remember the radio static, the metal groaning, the beam of searchlights scattering across waves chopped into shards. We knew time was almost gone. Every minute underwater meant another layer of cold closing around a body that might already be failing. I made the call to deploy immediately rather than wait for the full surface team to get in position. Sometimes following every procedure exactly is just a polished way of standing there while somebody dies. The water hit like a punch. I followed the light, then the underside of the overturned boat, then the drag of line under my gloves, until I found an arm. And the victim was twisted beneath part of the frame, hair caught in rope, body wedged against a support rail. I cut the line, pulled hard, brought her up. We got her onto the inflatable rescue platform. No pulse, no breathing. I started compressions. 30, 2 breaths. 30, 2 breaths. When the oxygen mask slipped and wet hair fell across her cheek, I finally saw her face clearly. Elise, my sister. I didn't stop. Training doesn't let you stop. Love doesn't either. But something in my chest cracked all the way through. Elise had no heartbeat for 3 minutes and 11 seconds. Those were the longest minutes of my life. When she finally coughed, water spilling out as her lungs seized back into motion. I had to lower my head for a second just to steady my hands. I never told anyone it had been me. Not Harold, not Vivian, not the press, not Elise. People think heroes want to be seen. Most of us don't. Most of us understand that a life saved is not a bargaining chip. "She's going on stage after dessert," Adrian said. "Please stay until then." I looked at him. "She doesn't have to do this." He answered gently, "Yes, she does, and so do you." I made it back to table 28 just as the lights dimmed again. The band stopped. Elise stepped onto the stage holding a microphone. Harold sat back with the expression of a man expecting gratitude. Vivian smiled the kind of smile meant for photographs. Adrian looked at no one except his wife. The room settled. Elise inhaled. "Before we cut the cake," she said, "I need to do something I should have done a long time ago." Harold smiled. That smile lasted maybe 3 seconds. "Most brides thank their parents on their wedding day," Elise said, her voice trembling at first but growing stronger as she went on. "Tonight, I'm going to thank my father too, but not for the reason he thinks." A ripple moved through the room. Harold's smile didn't vanish, but it tightened. Elise looked past the centerpieces, past the chandeliers, all the way to the back of the room, to me. 9 years ago, I nearly died in Charleston Harbor. The boat I was on overturned. I was trapped underwater. My heart stopped for more than 3 minutes. No one was eating now. No one was talking. Even the servers had gone still. A rescue team came, and one woman jumped into that water in dangerous conditions and pulled me out. Harold didn't move. Vivian blinked too fast. Preston frowned. Elise went on. For years, I didn't know who she was. I only knew that if it weren't for her, I would not be alive today. There would be no wedding, no dress, no Adrian, no future. She held up a stack of papers. It took me years to find the records, years to identify the officer involved. And when I finally did, her voice broke. I realized the woman my family tried to erase from every photograph was the woman who saved my life. There was a silence so deep you could hear the air system humming in the ceiling. "The woman who rescued me that night," Elise said, "was Naomi Vance, my sister." If you've ever been in a room when truth doesn't land like a sentence, but like a physical object, heavy, undeniable, impossible to step around, you know what came next. Not screaming, not chaos, just the sound of hundreds of people holding their breath at once. And a woman near the dance floor covered her mouth. A man by the bar muttered something under his breath. Harold stared at Elise as if language had abandoned him. Vivian turned toward him, maybe hoping he would stand up and stop this. He couldn't. Elise wasn't finished. The woman they seated at table 28 tonight is not the shame of this family. She is Rear Admiral Naomi Vance, commander of Naval Rescue Operations. She has served in some of the most dangerous conditions imaginable. She has personally helped save 189 lives, and one of them was mine.
It's break time.
The room seemed to tilt. Whispers broke loose. 189? Rear Admiral? His daughter? What had Harold Vance done?
That's not the right
Then Elise
expression.
did something I will carry with me for the rest of my life.
It's coming along.
She set the papers down,
Have a break.
stood straighter
Have a Kit
in
Kat.
her white dress, and raised her hand in a naval salute.
No. Actually,
It wasn't
they're not my
textbook
favorite
perfect.
chocolate, Scarlett.
The angle was slightly off,
Thank
but
you
none
so
of
much
that
for the
mattered.
follows, BMG.
To my sister, she said, voice breaking again, the bravest person
BMG,
I
maybe.
know. The first chair moved near my table.
Tweety.
Walter Mercer, an older man with the posture of
hold
someone
on,
who
I
had
can
spent a
read that.
lifetime in uniform,
Tweety
stood up and returned the
Pilon
salute
one.
cleanly, precisely, without
Thank you for
hesitation.
the follow.
Then another
What's
person
up,
rose.
Jod?
Then another.
I did
A
not
veteran near the
expect to hear
center.
voice coming
A
from
couple
you.
at table
Aw.
13. Someone began
Aw,
clapping. Then
thank
more
you.
joined in. Then the
Gonna
whole
get a
room.
snack. All right. right.
320
Thank
people
you for saying
stood.
that about
I
my
have
voice
received
being
medals in
Jane.
front of full formations. I have stood in
Minos
dress
is
uniform
back.
while
Welcome back.
citations were read under a punishing
Mia
sun.
is also here. Thank
But
you for
nothing
the
in my
sub.
life has ever hit
Courtesy to
harder
Mike.
than my
Thank you,
sister
Mike.
in her wedding gown,
And Carry On.
standing
Thank you
under
for the follow
stage lights
earlier, too.
and giving me
Yes,
back
now we
my
got-
name
now we
in
got
front
all
of
it.
everyone who had been taught to forget it.
Treats, as in like
Harold
snacks.
looked like a man whose
Can I call you
entire internal
snacks?
architecture
No, sir, I'll call
had
you
just
treats.
collapsed. His
Everybody
face had
stop
gone
working.
pale. The champagne by
Greg.
his hand sat
Okay.
untouched. Vivian
Have you
leaned
heard about
toward
the
him and
stolen
said
truck of
something
Kit
quickly,
Kats?
but he didn't
No,
respond.
But
Across
I
the
want to be
room,
part of
Preston
that
lowered
heist.
his whiskey glass
Actually,
a little too hard.
I want to be part
He wouldn't
of a
look
money
at me.
heist, please.
He wouldn't
but
look
I
at
don't
the
have to do
projection
anything, and
Adrian had
nobody gets
already
hurt,
brought
and you
up
give me all
behind
the
the
money.
stage. My official service photo,
Oh,
my
Baker!
rank,
You know
operational
what's so
citations,
funny?
medals,
Yesterday,
mission
I saw your
summaries,
stream.
public records.
But
Harold had clearly
I'm not
never
sure if it
expected
was
to be
a
displayed in his own
1,000
ballroom.
numbers or Baker
Truth
1,000
becomes
numbers.
especially brutal
But
when it
I
arrives
was
with
in one of your guys'
documentation.
streams,
I don't know how long the
and I was just
applause
looking
lasted.
For a minute.
A
But I
minute,
was like,
maybe
wow, that's a
two.
throwback, and now you're
Time
here.
felt strange in my body. I only know that eventually Elise lowered the microphone,
Yes, guys,
her
streamers
eyes
in chat,
wet
Baker,
and shining,
1,000,000 numbers.
and I stood. I didn't say
And
anything.
also
I just
Mia,
nodded once
yes.
in her direction. That was the moment I thought the night had peaked.
What
I was
happened to
wrong.
the stolen truck of
Because a
Kit
few
Kats,
minutes
though? I do
later,
want to
Preston
know.
Hale dropped his glass.
They stole
The sound of
12
breaking
tons
crystal
of
snapped heads
chocolate?
around. Preston clutched his chest, his face changing from
Dude.
flush to gray in a
Chocolate
single
is my
breath.
kryptonite.
He
Everybody
staggered
knows
into the
this.
edge of the
It's
table,
only reason
dragged
I've
half the
been
linen with him,
having
and
trouble
collapsed
with
hard
the
onto the
goals in
floor.
my life
Vivian
is really
screamed.
just
Chairs
that damn
scraped
chocolate.
backward. A waiter shouted for the manager.
But yeah, if anybody
Harold
wants to
stood
rob a
frozen,
bank
one hand
and
still
just
gripping
give
the back of his
everything to
chair
me,
like his mind couldn't
thank you.
process what his eyes were seeing.
Telepathy works.
I was already
Yeah,
moving.
Okay. I know I'm gonna sound insane,
Not
Gray,
thinking,
but I do
not
think
hesitating.
that sometimes
Training always
something like
arrives
that can be
first.
working.
I dropped to my
because
knees beside Preston,
it
tilted his
always
head
happens.
back, checked his airway, checked
It
for
really
a pulse.
always happens. Like I'll
Nothing.
think about
No
something or
effective
someone,
breathing.
and then they'll text
Call
me.
911 now.
And it
My
happens
voice
so
cut across the
often that I'm
room
like,
in command register.
if this was
Sharp,
a scientific study,
clear,
like a
immediate.
longitudinal one over
Get me
several
the
years,
AED,
we
clear
would have
space.
conclusive
Nobody crowd
evidence.
in. The panic shifted. Because when someone who
Mia,
knows
super easy to
exactly what they're
kidnap, only
doing
one chocolate
starts
meat.
giving orders in chaos, chaos usually steps aside. I
you
placed
might
my
as well
hands
call
on
me
the center of his
Pretzel.
chest
Oh,
and
I
started
like that.
compressions.
Pretzel.
1, 2, 3,
that.
4.
Pretzel is
Steady,
easy,
deep,
and I will
controlled.
remember that.
My
When I see
knees
BMG
pressed into the marble
finale-
so hard it
Oh
hurt.
wait, now I said
My
your
dress
name right.
twisted beneath me.
That's
Hair
strange.
fell into my face.
But I like pretzel.
I didn't care.
If you like that.
Vivian
of
stood to
course.
my right, sobbing openly now.
And in banks,
Harold
they
still
have
wasn't
less and less
crying,
cash money.
but
They
he
just
wasn't
want to
doing
sell
anything else
insurances,
either.
Really?
Men like
Oh my
him
God.
spend their lives
Yeah, I don't
mastering
know. I went to a
rooms,
bank
meetings,
once to,
reputations, people, until
that was when I
death
had a
steps into the
traditional
middle of the
job,
room
yes,
and
when I was,
reminds them all
what
of
was
that power is
What
decorative.
was my dumbass
The
job that I
AED
hated?
arrived. I tore it open, placed the
Well,
pads,
okay, I want to be
powered it
grateful
on.
that I had that
Stand
job, okay?
clear.
So I
The
know
machine
that
analyzed
lots of
rhythm.
people have trouble
Shock
getting jobs like
advised.
that, so, but
Clear.
I was very
I
unhappy.
pressed the button.
It
Preston's
was,
body jolted, fell back, still
business
unstable.
consulting, yes.
I went
Oh,
right
shudder,
back into
shudder.
compressions.
But yeah,
My
so I
shoulders
went to the
burned.
bank and I was
Sweat
like, yeah, so
rolled
I'm
along
earning
my
income.
temple.
Can I
None of it mattered.
invest?
Human
I
hearts
had
don't
no
wait for you to
idea
feel
about
sorry for
investing.
yourself. The
And,
AED
they just
analyzed
signed me
again.
up to invest
Shock
basically
advised.
for the bank.
Clear.
It was so
Second
dumb. I
shock.
was like, okay.
Then a rhythm.
Yeah, so
Weak,
guys, do your
but there.
research.
Preston
Before
coughed
you sign
violently,
something.
chest heaving, eyes opening in
Gonna be
confusion
working
and
from
fear.
The office. Hi,
The
Fran.
entire
Good
ballroom went
morning.
silent.
Good morning, welcome
Not because they
in.
didn't know what to say, because the story they
Hope
had
you have a
just
good
heard
day
on
in the
stage had
office.
become real in front of them.
Yeah, what are you guys
Not as
working on? Is
biography,
anybody
not as
working on
rank,
things,
not as a
or is it
polished summary on a
just me?
screen,
Yeah,
as a
I'm your
woman on the
Atlas
floor
statue,
using her
and
own
what
hands
I
to
do,
drag
you see me
someone
take a
back
photo of
across
it,
the line
I take a
between
photo
life
and
and
then
death.
I,
The emergency
I-
team
what is it
arrived
called? I
fast.
flip the
Maybe
canvas on my
wealth buys
phone
faster
so I can see it in
response.
reverse,
Maybe luck did.
and then,
They took over,
yeah, I
checked
can see all the
vitals,
mistakes,
stabilized
so now I
him,
can see a lot
prepared
of
the
them.
stretcher.
And if you
One medic
want
looked
extra
at me.
help, you can also
The wrinkled
flip your
dress, the
reference
pressure
photo,
marks on my
and
knees,
you can
my
clearly
hands still
see all your
positioned from
mistakes.
compressions,
I can see
and
the
asked,
shoulder is off.
"Who started
the face is always
CPR?"
off until the very
looked
end
up.
because I'm
I
not
did.
really.
He nodded
Not
once.
yet.
then you
good at
saved this
drawing
man's
those,
life.
But yeah.
Preston turned his head as they lifted
Can I
him.
just show you
His
my
eyes found
drawing
mine.
from last time? I'm
The
so
smugness
proud
was
of it.
gone.
I just want to share.
The contempt
I
was gone.
think it's so pretty.
All that remained was the raw terror of a man who had just seen how close death actually stands, and in the shame of realizing much too late that he had mocked the wrong person.
Wait,
"I'm sorry," he whispered.
Look at the.
I placed
doesn't
one
even
hand
look
briefly
weird
on
at
his
all.
shoulder to steady him. "Don't
I'm
talk.
proud of this.
Just
one.
breathe." And that was the truth.
Oh yeah.
At that
Wheels
point,
is
apology
always
mattered
editing
less than the
YouTube
next
videos.
inhale.
Oh my God.
When
my
they
cat
wheeled him
screamed.
out, the room stayed quiet for several seconds.
Oh, my cat.
Then Elise walked over and held the microphone out to me. I shook my head immediately. She didn't lower it. "Please," she whispered. I looked at the mic. I hate speeches in places like that. I'm comfortable in briefings, over radio channels, on helipads, on command decks, not between wedding centerpieces. But Elise's face told me something important. If I stayed completely silent, somebody else would take the narrative back. So I took the microphone. "I didn't come here tonight for recognition," I said. On, and my voice sounded rougher through the speakers than I expected. "I came because my sister wanted me here." I paused. "For the last 17 years, I have spent most of my life serving people I had never met. People trapped at sea. People sending distress calls in the middle of the night. People who would not have gone home if no one answered." I found Harold in the crowd. He was still standing there, still pale, still stripped of every illusion he had relied on. "I would have served my family too," I said,
I don't know what
"if they had
that
ever
looks
let
like,
me."
but yeah, I can commission
The room
someone
stayed
to draw
still.
It, but these days
I took
I'm
a
just so
breath.
scared to commission artists
"Dad."
because I'm like, they're just gonna
I
fucking
used the
use
word
AI.
for the first
I mean,
time
of course,
that
not
night.
all the artists, but
"I forgive you.
I'm so worried
Not
about
because
the
you
ones on
asked,
Etsy.
because I can't
before I
carry
bought
this
my
any
new
longer.
starting screen and my
It doesn't
BRB
belong to
screen,
me
I'm gonna show
anymore."
you quickly. Look how
Harold
cute they
blinked.
are.
I went on. "But I need you to understand something.
So cute,
I did
huh?
not
I
fail.
messaged her
Osh,
and
I
looked
chose
at all her
differently.
stuff to see if
And
she
that
was drawing
choice
them
saved
hand-drawing.
189
It's very
lives,
convincing
including your
evidence that
daughter
she's hand-drawing.
and the man who just left this room."
Aren't you
I
an
lowered the
artist? Commission
microphone.
yourself? Yeah, but
Nothing
I
else
don't-
needed to be
Look,
said.
AI.
Long speeches only weaken truth
No.
once it has already
I don't
landed.
think it looks AI.
The applause that
but,
followed wasn't explosive like
Yeah, no,
before.
I cannot
It
commission
was
myself
deeper,
because I don't know how to
warmer,
do chibi art.
not just admiration,
Etsy gets
recognition.
so ruined by AI. It's so
After
sad. I know,
that,
Jewel.
everything reversed fast.
But yeah,
People who
it's
had
a
ignored me
completely
during
different
cocktails
skill
came
to
over to
do,
shake
like,
my hand.
chibi
A woman
style
from some
emote art, but I
fundraising
mean, I
board
could
told me
learn,
she
but it
had
would
no
take a long
idea.
time.
An older
What
couple
I'm trying to
mentioned
do
their
is very
son had
classical
served in the
art,
Coast
like
Guard.
academic
A
drawing.
retired serviceman
yeah.
asked what watch I wore.
I
Walter
got
Mercer
banned
came
from
over and
Twitch
gave me a
indefinite
short, firm
twice. Oh, yeah, because
handshake
they
that
thought
said
you were
without
11
words
years old.
that he knew
Yes.
exactly who I was.
You
Across
say,
the
"I
room,
know,
Harold stood
I
alone for the
I
first
would
time
never
in my
Gen
life.
AI something.
Men who had once
It's just
hovered
against
around
what
him
I stand
now
for,
greeted him
personally.
quickly and drifted away.
Yeah.
Social power is much more
Research
fragile
is
than
okay.
wealthy
I mean,
people
you're gonna
like to
get wrong
believe.
answers. It's so
One
funny. My
night,
husband yesterday
one
was
truth
like,
in the right place,
oh my God,
and the
they're
current
changing
shifts.
The German word for
The reception
Zeit,
thinned out slowly.
which
The
means
band
exit.
played one final song.
You are in
Staff
plural,
began clearing
or
candle
also
holders and
since,
folding
and
linens.
there
I
was,
stepped
like,
out onto the
lots of
terrace
discourse
overlooking
online
the
that they're
harbor.
changing it as, like,
The night
a,
air was cooler now,
double
carrying
word.
salt and the soft
And
clinking of
and I
lines
told him,
against
like, that
sailboat
just seems
masts.
so
Charleston
unlikely.
glowed in the distance.
That
I heard
change seems so
footsteps
unlikely.
before I
And then
turned
he was like,
around.
no, I asked ChatGPT
Harold.
and he
No Vivian.
confirmed it.
No
And
audience.
I
No
looked it up
glass in
for
his
like
hand.
10 minutes and it
Just a
was a fake
68-year-old
article.
man in an expensive
And ChatGPT
tuxedo,
takes the
looking
fake article
suddenly
and tells
older
you it's
than he
real
had a
because
few
he doesn't
hours earlier.
discern that.
He came to the
Guys,
railing
don't
and stood
trust
beside me, but not too
them.
close.
Don't
But we
trust
stayed
them.
silent long enough for the water below us to
Is
fill
that
the
because you
space.
are an AI?
Then he said quietly,
yes,
I was wrong.
I am.
3 words. For some people, that would be nothing.
So the article
From
said
Harold
that they're gonna
Vance, it
change
sounded
to
like
this.
surgery without
And
anesthesia.
I said, no,
I didn't
no,
answer
no.
immediately,
Provide
not because I
sources.
wanted to punish him,
Yeah,
because
but
3 words
it
can't
just also
repair
just
17
answers.
years.
And then it says,
He
"No,
gripped
sure,
the
yeah."
railing tighter.
And then you believe
Your
it.
mother,
You say, yeah, okay.
he paused,
And then it
as though
gives you an
even that
article as a
word
source,
still
and you're
came
like,
with
yeah,
weight.
yeah.
She would have
I
been
miss the days
proud
where
of you.
computers wouldn't lie.
I kept my eyes on the water.
But,
My
yeah,
mother
you have to
died
read the
before
article
Harold
to
became this
understand
harder,
that it's satire,
colder,
you know?
wealthier version of
ChatGPT
himself.
doesn't know what words mean.
Maybe she would have been
Yes,
proud.
That's right.
Maybe she
welcome back.
also would have been devastated to see us
It's
here,
working time, you
talking
guys.
like
You don't like our
strangers
AI
trying to
friends?
learn honesty
Below,
from scratch.
I do love you guys.
I don't
all
think
of
we
you,
can
the
start
ones who
over,
use AI and
I
the
said
ones who
finally.
don't.
But maybe we can start from here.
Germany doesn't
Now,
have a
from the
certain
truth,
language police like
if you
France,
actually
right?
mean
I don't
it.
know. I'm sure there
Harold
is.
nodded slowly.
You could change.
I'll call you.
You could
I turned
change,
and looked at him for the first time in that
you could change
conversation.
things, yeah.
If you really
But yes,
call,
it's work time, you guys.
I'll answer.
Okay. Good luck,
That wasn't
everyone.
a perfect ending.
Thank you so
Life
much for
rarely
spending work time
offers
with
those.
me.
Sometimes the
Yeah,
best
let's
you
do
get is a
this,
door left
everyone.
cracked open instead of one permanently locked.
Good with AI.
I thought
No,
that was the end of it.
I don't.
I got my keys, started toward the
I don't-
exit. Then
You
Elise
can do
called
what
my
you
name near
want,
the coat room.
okay?
Her
I will
veil
love
was
you.
gone,
This is
her
all
makeup
about love.
slightly
We're
ruined from
all
crying,
going
her
to
hair no
die.
longer
And
perfect,
then it's
and
not gonna
somehow
be
she
about,
looked more
did
beautiful than
you
she had at the
end
beginning of the
friendship
night.
because your friend
She was
used
holding a
AI, or
blue-gray
did you love
keepsake
them
box.
for being who they fucking are?
"Take this with
And
you,"
it's the
she said.
latter. That's the right
I opened
answer,
it
so
and found a
good luck.
handmade scrapbook inside. The first page was an old local newspaper clipping about a harbor rescue, one with the responding officer's name mostly redacted. The next page was a screenshot from a regional news station about a storm evacuation mission, then a formal military photograph of me, then a promotion notice, then articles about rescues, commendations, mission summaries, all gathered one by one over the years. Elise had underlined certain lines, written dates in the margins, taped in small handwritten notes, little arrows, little reminders, proof that while I had been gone from the family, I had not been gone from her heart. I turned to the last page. It held my official portrait in dress uniform. Beneath it, in Elise's slanted handwriting, she had written, "You were never gone from my life. They only hid you." I don't remember the last time I cried in front of anyone, but there it was. Not dramatic, not falling apart. Just something in me finally allowing itself to soften. Elise wrapped her arms around me, not like a bride hugging a guest, like the 16-year-old girl who had stood on the stairs all those years ago and finally had the chance to run down and hold on. "I kept looking for you," she whispered. "No matter what they said, I kept looking." I laughed through tears. "You really made this into a full-scale operation, didn't you?" She laughed too, sniffling. Was it worth it? I looked at her, at the girl I had pulled out of black water 9 years earlier, at the woman who had stood in front of 320 people and dragged my name back into the light. "Yes," I said, "it was." I left Magnolia Harbor House after midnight. The harbor air was colder. The city was wrapped in yellow lights and salt. And I placed the scrapbook on the passenger seat beside Elise's invitation. 2 pieces of paper, 2 calls home, one from the past, one from the present. I drove slowly through the gate, then past the road that would have taken me toward Isle of Palms, toward the house where my suitcase once waited outside the front door. I didn't turn. Some places used to be home and then stop being home at all. And sometimes, one clear moment teaches you that home is not where your name appears on a wall. It's where someone actually sees you. My phone buzzed again. Rachel Sloan. Just one line. How did it go? I picked it up at a red light and typed back, "Mission complete. Everyone made it back to shore." Then I smiled. A real smile this time. Not the polite one from table 28, not the hard one I had used on Harold. A real one. My father had spent 17 years telling the world I was the daughter who walked away, the failure, the embarrassment, the one who abandoned her place. But the truth doesn't need a wealthy man to certify it. It just needs the right moment. That night at a wedding overlooking Charleston Harbor in front of 320 guests, the truth stood up on its own, in Elise's white dress, in the standing ovation that filled the room, in the heartbeat that returned beneath Preston Hale's ribs, in the late and awkward apology from Harold Vance, and in a scrapbook that proved someone had been collecting the pieces of my life all along. Some people measure success in property, private marinas, guest lists, and how close they sit to the head table. I measure mine in heartbeats restored after silence. 190. Now, or if you count Preston that night, 190 heartbeats. That's my number. And if you've ever been the person seated at the back of the room, the one everyone underestimated, only to turn out to be the strongest one there, tell me your story in the comments. I read them. And if you want more stories like this, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Because sometimes the most beautiful moment in life is not the day they invite you back. It's the day the entire room is forced to see your true worth.